The Rebellers by Jane Roberts. A novel. Read by Martin John. Chapter 12. Regardless of his disillusionment and anger, Fitch slept well that night. Yet for a long while he looked out the window of the Borough building, down at the Contropolis below. The enormity of his task staggered him, but the vision of the old gallery paintings egged him on. Fact or imagination, the scenes in them gave him an idea to work with and a goal. He'd been unable to act during his years in the gallery. He'd been incapable of acting during his first encounter with the outside. But now he was ready. The mayor had given them all new clothes, and in the morning Lyle met with Fitch and his group in his office. "I'm putting an ACOP at your disposal," he said. "You'll need it. I suggest that you keep out of the most crowded areas of the borough, however. God knows how the people will act. They're liable to riot at the sight of an official vehicle. So many have been seen leaving the area." He stood behind his desk, smiling faintly. "I wish you luck, believe it or not. Nevertheless, you'll have to excuse me if I fail to see how I can succeed in a project that professionals consider absolutely impossible." "I thought you'd be gone by daybreak," Janice said tartly. "I'm beyond insults, young lady," Lyle said, nodding at her. "It's more mature to run in some cases than to be foolhardy or headstrong. You live longer that way. You can fight again at some future date." "Did you tell the art warden to expect us?" Fitch said. "I did. He'll see you. But that's all I can promise." "Maybe they won't let us out again," Mandy said, with a grin. "In fact, if we play our cards right, maybe we can have our safe little room back." Janice glowered at him. As they left the office, the mayor stopped Sloat. Good luck," he said. "I hope you get through this all right. We haven't always seen eye to eye." "It's too late for regrets," Sloat said quietly. "We had the opportunity to do something, and we didn't. You'll have to take care of your own conscience, Mayor. This is my way." Sloat was quiet in the elevator. Fitch said, "You're still thinking about what Toby said, aren't you? That's water over the dam now." "Is it?" "He was right," Sloat said soberly. "So were you. We philosophized and sat on our asses." "Better late than never," Janice said cheerfully. "I'll tell you one thing, though. I have a lot of respect for you guys. I'm not complaining, but life in the borough is pretty tough. No one ever tried to help the people before, as far as I know. The only thing, don't expect me to hurt Toby in any way. I won't. He's doing what he thinks is right, too, you know." They were outside. "Head for the heart of the borough," Fitch said. to hell with safety. I want to see how bad things are, and you can't do that by skirting the main sections." What they saw horrified all of them except Janice. She couldn't resist a dig at Sloat. "What are you white-faced about?" she said. "You've been on the outside all your life. Or was your outside different than mine?" "I deserve that," he said quietly. "During previous plagues, I was never in the middle of it. None of us were. We just holed up in our apartments until it was over." "Yeah, I know," she said. "Boy, when I compare those official apartments with the hotels I lived in," she shrugged. "Oh, I'll lay off," she said. "Hey, look down there." A small booth was set up in the square beneath them. Crude lettering read, "No pox." "Their own clumsy attempt at immunization," Sloat said. "We've come across it before. Survivors of a plague attack open up old sores and infect anyone who'll pay for the dubious privilege. Since the first person is still alive, they figure that the patient will come down with a mild dose that will give him immunity from a more lethal attack. I suppose it's a way of killing suspense." "Lots of times it kills the patient," Janice said. "Hold on," Fitch said. They hovered the ACOP about 12 feet in the air between the buildings and above the tattered cloth immunization booth. An old woman in front of the booth yelled out in a crackle, "No pox! No pox! Beat the pox!" In competition, the loudspeakers blared, "Work! Work! Work! Go! Go! Go!" Then suddenly the loudspeakers grew silent. The old woman sprang up in alarm, grabbed the cloths and sticks that held up the booth, and motioned to someone outside. A man rushed out and came to her assistance. Fitch looked for sights of the pox on him and saw none. Then, however, the man reached out to grab a pole, and his arm showed clearly, flung out toward the rickety framework of the booth. The arm was littered with pustules and scabbed sores. The crowd surrounding the booth disappeared. "The street cleaners are coming. No wonder the people took off," Janice cried. And in the distance, Fitch saw the street cleaners' trucks thundering through the streets. He felt sick, remembering his own experience. The ground was littered with the weak and exhausted who had fallen beneath the crowds. Fitch said angrily, "There's a book at the gallery that describes the Middle Ages, a time when all learning and decency was forgotten. I used to think that it was fiction. Well, we have it beaten by far." He paused to regain his self-control and said quietly, "Sloat, I just want to know one thing. Will those people be inoculated?" Sloat shook his head. "Probably not. The doctors will figure that most of them will die of malnutrition anyhow. Why waste good vaccine? That's how they look at it." Fitch couldn't take his eyes off the scene below. "I'm going to force Toby to help us. If it's the last thing I do," he said. "With his powers of persuasion, maybe he could convince the people to accept inoculations. Well, we may as well head for the gallery and get it over with. Play along with me, no matter what I say. I might have to try a bluff." They approached the gallery, using the ACOP like a car now. Despite himself, Fitch looked up and saw the huge wall with something like nostalgia. His life at the gallery seemed like a dream. The guard saw the official car and motioned them through. "Easier to get in than it was to get out," Mandy said, trying a joke. Fitch grinned. The scenes of the square had been too much for Mandy. His face was white and he looked sick. Janice looked at him protectively. They entered the front hallway and were instantly directed to the art warden's office on the first floor. Fitch had seen the man only about 10 times in his long stay at the gallery, but he recognized him at once. Warden Graham looked stockier close up than he did at a distance. His hair was thin, and he wore glasses. "Well," he said jovially, "Gary Finch and Mandy Braille, the prodigals return." "Did the mayor tell you why?" Fitch said. "No, he only suggested that I see you. Also, he gave orders that you weren't to be detained here." "There goes our last chance to hide," Mandy said. "Boy, this is some layout." Janice looked around the well-appointed office with obvious appreciation. "I always wondered what the gallery was like. Everyone outside does, I guess. I thought that artists were warmongers. What do you do? Hide your arsenal?" The warden smiled at her condescendingly. "All right, I'll come to the point," Fitch said. "We have the authority to do what we can to protect the populace during the crisis. We want to inoculate the artists here and use them to help fight the plague. They'll be helpful in many ways. As part of a barricade, for example, to keep scavengers out of the borough and to help prevent riots. Also, we want to set up the gallery facilities as a hospital." The warden's face registered disbelief, shock, and scandalized refusal. His smile vanished. He stood up quickly. "No, absolutely not. I've never heard anything so ridiculous in all my life. I'm against the whole thing, that's all." "Why?" "Why? You were here in the gallery for some 20 years. I looked up your record when the mayor said you were coming. You know very well that our plague rate was much lower than it was outside. Isolation is the answer. Now you want me to open up my doors and then directly involve the artists in a project that could have dire consequences? And using the artists as an armed force? What do they know about guns?" "But the people think artists know how to use guns, all right," Janice said. Sloat will train the men, Fitch said quietly. And how on earth do you presume to get the artists back in here after they've had a taste of freedom? The art warden thundered. Mandy said with a laugh, "One look at the outside and they'll plead to come home." But Fitch paused soberly. He wanted everyone in the room to hear what he had to say. Even though the boldness of his plan amazed him, he said, "We don't get them back here. That's part of it." Warden Graham's face blanched. "Why, you're out of your mind," he said. Even Sloat stared at Fitch with astonishment. But now that he'd spoken, Fitch was convinced that he was right. He said firmly, "When this is over, we're going to share our knowledge with the people. They're going to see all those books and all those paintings and find out for themselves how much they've already lost and what they stand to gain." Sloat said, frowning, "I never thought that you seriously considered—" "You can back out any time," Fitch said coldly. "And that goes for all of you." "I'm not backing out," Sloat said. "This gallery is my responsibility," Warden Graham said loudly. His large round eyes snapped angrily behind his glasses. "I'm not opening it to the public now or ever. I'll close the place up and starve first." "You might just do that," Fitch said calmly. "You can't hold out for long. If you can't accept food from the outside, how can you be sure that it isn't handled in, how can you be sure that it isn't handed in by infected hands? You'd have to deal with the black market because you won't get any borough food supplies. I'll tell you that now, because I'll be in control of all borough supplies." "You and who else?" the warden said triumphantly. "You must think I'm a fool. You come here with these preposterous demands, and no way at all to back them up. You're lucky that I just didn't kick you out to begin with." Fitch paused. He knew that he had to bluff, and he hoped he could carry the bluff through. Without the artists on his side, his plan would be completely useless. He lied quickly, smoothly, and desperately. "The rebellers have joined us. The city officials will abandon the borough, as you have probably surmised. The police will follow suit. The few who do stay will be with us. We'll raid the gallery and get what we want in any case. Only if you hold out too long, we may not have enough vaccine left to inoculate all your men." The warden's mouth gaped open. Mandy turned white. Fitch stared at Graham coldly. But would the bluff work? And if it did, it was imperative that he forced the rebellers to join him before Graham discovered that he'd been taken. "I'm going to call the mayor and call your bluff," the warden said nervously. Fitch said, "Call him." Find out for yourself." Mandy gulped painfully. Sloat looked at Fitch with a worried frown. The warden said with a touch of spite, "If you'd rather I didn't, of course." "Call him," Fitch said, with more confidence than he felt. The warden shrugged and went over to a console that stood by his desk. "I can see that those things come in handy," Fitch said. "Quite handy," the warden said smugly. "All government offices have them. At one time the whole world was visible from any place on it, provided a set was available, of course. Unfortunately, scientific advancement has suffered setbacks. Satellites above the Earth make the televisors possible, but they were put up in orbit centuries ago, and we don't have the facilities to repair them. Luckily, for the most part, they're almost indestructible. Now, let's see what the mayor has to say, shall we?" He grinned meaningfully. Fitch didn't move a muscle. He was so afraid of giving himself away. "This is my way of taking care of my This is my way of taking care of my conscience," Sloat had told Mayor Lyle. Now he was giving the mayor the same chance. But would he take it? Fitch wondered. Was it possible that he had the mayor pegged wrong? "Mayor Lyle," the warden said. The mayor's worried face appeared on the screen. Warden Graham said angrily, "Are the rebellers joining forces with this group that you sent here? I know that the idea is ridiculous, but that's their story, and I wanted to check on the far-fetched chance that there might be something to it." Mandy turned his head. Sloat and Fitch eyed each other wordlessly. Fitch touched the back of a chair to steady himself. Suddenly he wondered what had ever given him the idea that the mayor would go along with his bluff. Lyle knew damn well that the rebellers were an uncommitted element so far. The mayor began to speak. Sick with suspense, Fitch looked up to listen. In Chapter 12. Peace, light, and love. Aloha. And mahalo endlessly for listening.